Welcome to ABC. Today we're going over the e-gambling to anime car wraps to pedophilia pipeline. Just kidding, although that does sound like a really fun topic to explore. In regards to, I don't know, just post-modernity in general. Those anime car wraps guys are in line with the exact people that I always hate so much. Annoying, loud, attention-seeking, yet somehow completely psychotic and antisocial. So if you're attention-seeking, right, then you're probably some level of socially invested. But if you're antisocial, as in you don't care about societal rules, and if you actively practice it, then you are a sociopath. Or I think that's more of like you can't respect or grasp societal rules. Naturally, there's a lot of sociopaths who are good people. They care for and love animals, but they dislike modern humans and what they've turned into, right? You probably know a lot of people like that. But it's so strange that you have histrionic antisocial people, and it's anime. If you ever watched some of these animes, they program it right into your brain that you should be as annoying, and main character syndrome, Nancy Sue, Mary Sue. You should be, you should scoff and act as infantile as possible at any given opportunity, because the camera phrasing and the way that people respond to that behavior in anime makes it seem like it's a cool and good thing to do, a wise thing to do. It's very fascinating because the anime that I grew up with, it may have been violent, but no more so than anything else in the 90s, other visual media in the 90s. But it did not have the level of psychosis that modern anime does. I think modern anime might be victim of Project Monarch. Project Monarch is like an expanded Epstein project. And I do feel in my heart of hearts that Japan has fallen victim to the exact thing that our country has fallen victim to, which is the financial bottlenecking of anybody that seeks to actively root out the psychological issues, and a flooding with resources of anybody who actually increases psychological issues in that particular host country to make it weaker and more susceptible to parasitic infection by Indians and Israelis. Specifically, coalition of Indians and Israelis. I don't know why India does it, but, you know, when I was reading the Kama Sutra when I was younger, I felt myself, like, losing my mind. I felt myself becoming very, I felt my brain, like, floating, like, 2 meters above my head for a while when I was reading that book. And I come to find out many, many years later, after I just put it down and went, well, that's an interesting book, and then went on with the rest of my life, I would find out many, many years later that it's like statistical schizophrenia, that when the Kama Sutra says that there is like 36 ways of doing something, what it is actually doing is outlining a methodology for creating spokes in a wheel. That's ultimately what it's doing. It's creating gears. That's what it's doing. It is faceting these mechanics for a society to run on. And the society that the Kama Sutra seeks to create is a polite yet psychotic society. One that appreciates material very, very much, but at the same time keeps its mind a good 2 meters above its head. And, you know, it's what it is. Serious. Probably. It would be a fascinating thing to, like, bust it up into 5 parts and then just read through the entire Kama Sutra. Be a fascinating thing. And I don't think it would be, too crass for YouTube. It's not really all that sexual. It's more about, it's a statistical manual for the religion. In fact, one of the 3 main chapters is how to be a good countryman, as in how to serve your community. It's like kind of like Confucianism, you know, Marcus Aurelius style, ancient statistical manual for serving your country and your culture and your people. AI has created a cloud cuckoo land. Well, we'll never know if an African kid built a backhoe out of water bottles or not. But for real, though, the long-term effects on people's excitement and empathy, it's gonna be dire. It's gonna be dire. It's already looking a little dire with the amount of AI that's been directed and utilized to manipulate old people. Chief among it is like literally showing like Elon Musk's robot, which is a puppet. It is de facto a puppet. It doesn't fit the like Asimovian definition of a robot. It is a puppet. And by the way, the word robot is a Bohemian origin. I thought that was fascinating. It's of Czech origin. What it is a puppet. And it's fascinating because we all remember the time when Elon Musk brought a bunch of people in costumes out on stage to dance. And he's just like, well, those were obviously not robots, but how cool would it be if they were? I've been working on my Elon. Impression a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's puppet. It's puppetry. It's, you know, ooh, look at that little thing. Look at it go. Then you see like fully functioning, like human operating, like they're operating with the smoothness and the grace of a human being next to a person who's completely and utterly manufactured out of whole cloth with AI. You know, that illusion, that Socrates cave, lights flickering on the wall, is legitimately the only thing that we've seen AI be utilized in, other than ChatGPT helping with coding, language learning, and basically as a new Google, a search engine that doesn't have ads shot through it, that just chops up the ability to... We've had this. We grew up with a Google that had the same level, if not better, of knowledge uptake, of wisdom searching, perusing, excuse me, that we grew up with that like 15 years ago, that ChatGPT has today. So it's an interesting thing, you know. People say we've been domesticated by wheat, but the situation is far more dire. What you see here is the Apollonian cereals and the Dionysian fungi. To assume humanity is not the most capable thing God's nature has ever produced is foolish. What is visibly observable is how beer spread from culture to culture and slowly started to dissolve the ancient bonds weaving the culture together to the point where the cultures that would maintain their ancient ways would have to be teetotalers. All the other cultures that adopted bars into their societies dissolved into what we assume a humanity conquered by cereals, high-yield cereals like wheat and white rice looks like. But if you look at China and you're looking at it with on an honest lens, you'll be like, this less alcoholic society. Some Asian people, some Korean people have allergies to alcohol. They're so alcohol-free for so long in their history. And like Korea is like the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and Korea are the two big unspoken countries in history, especially late medieval history. Right before the Enlightenment, Korea, with Confucian thought, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, with a combination of Orthodoxy and Catholicism. They called it... I learned this term 2 months ago. Very specifically, I know somebody whose family traces their lineage from this in my church. The name escapes me at the moment. It might be called Ruthenian Catholics or something. Byzantine Catholics? It's Byzantine Catholics. That's what it's called. It's called Byzantine Catholics. The Byzantine Catholics are the Catholics that occupied large portions of what is now Ukraine, that used to be Lithuania, that turned into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Poland, mind you, connects all the way from Odessa all the way up to Danzig in the Prussian coast. So that's a Poland now owns Danzig, and they call it Gdansk. And that right there is probably the singular point that would still create conflict in the future between the Poles and the Germans, is fighting over Danzig, which at the end of the day is neither German nor Polish, but instead a free city in the Holy Roman Empire. I don't know how to solve that one. Anyways, I thought the borrowed this term from Matt Christman, the Apollonian cereals, the cereals of the sun, the Dionysian fungi, the fungi of the moon, and how they shape our spiritual connection from our bodies to our souls. The fungi, very important, incredibly important for the development of humanity. And the cereals, the thing that drove us out of the protection and comfort of underground caves, where the Socratic cave is a place where you can literally, like, you're entertained, you've been living there forever, you're chill, and what you get to eat is you get to eat like lichen, and you get to drink fresh water, and it goes through an aquifer level, and it goes to you, and then you eat the lichen around, and the mushrooms around there. It's literally dwarves. Literally dwarves. Dwarves are the people that consider themselves undomesticated by wheat. And what are they? They're literally cavemen. Like, if you actually learn a lot of history and you think about things really, really hard, there was never really a time in super ancient history, talking like 2 million years ago, where the caveman thing existed. There could have been some time in the last 100,000 years where there was like a caveman style situation going on. But what forced those people out of their caves was the ultimate knowledge and wisdom and tools of being able to farm in the sun, to practice transhumance with your livestock, to learn how to weave the reeds into clothes that would protect you from the elements that are outside of the cave. And I also think that this is the notion of goblins, that the people with bigger eyes, you know, there's a type of people who have super big eyes, and there's a type of people who have super small eyes. So there's some racial element here. A lot of Germans do have super big eyes. A lot of Asian people do have very small eyes. I think a lot of the people who have super big eyes they have ancestry that stayed in the caves longer. Maybe the caves were the warmest spot in the absolutely icy Scandinavian tundra, you know, with around the fjords and stuff like that. And so you have these women with these big, huge, beautiful eyes. And he's just like, yeah, their ancestors was goblins. And what are the elves? The elves are the people that live by the rivers that considered their trees to be their ancestral home and ancestral guardians, because we did used to chill up in trees way back in the day, and the snake was one of the only things that could get up into those trees. We're going into Jordan Peterson theology now, and it's very likely that the threat of the snake going up into the tree and eating the woman's baby is what made the woman choose to grab a hold of knowledge, to grab that forbidden fruit of upsetting the balance that the man was perfectly happy in, even if he lived in a very, very painful life, that the woman was happy with, even though childbirth is the most painful thing of existence, aside from losing your child. See Gaza. See the immense curse that the Zionists are placing them and everybody around them under, specifically because of the psychic wave of intense pain and terror that's coming out of mothers losing their children. And, you know, I've heard people on Kiwi farms say, oh, they've been starving forever. I guess they'll just starve for another 5 years, huh? Yeah, right. They're not starving. I could see this. I could see German people saying the same thing about Polish people in concentration camps. I can hear that. I can hear it right now. I can hear it right now. Anyways, let's move on from that, shall we? Let's talk about something very interesting. Funny enough, societies that farm tubers like beets and root vegetables end up with the highest level of independence. So it's not meat. That's not the secret. It really, really isn't. And people are starting to learn this over the last 5 or 10 years of experimenting. It's not meat. There is no inherent magical properties to meat. It will not give you +5 strength by just eating it and not working out. There is something that would be considered magical, but it has no magic involved. It has everything to do with our ancestors cultivating it over and over and over again. The nitric oxide, not to be confused with nitrous oxide, which is huffing gas, laughing gas. Nitric oxide. The nitric oxide beetroot puts in your blood actually does allow you to go farther, hunt faster, farm harder, live longer, have a more fulfilling life. And they still will. I give you my word. I swear. It really will. The beet is, in my opinion, the ultimate strength of the Indo-European people. Not any inherent Aryan powers. Even though I do notice that the muscles that I build tend to be a little bit bigger on average than people with Mediterranean complexions. That's not it, okay? That was something that was trained into my ancestry. And yes, I do have a lot more Neanderthal than those people. So that has something to do with it. But the strength of the Indo-European people, see, the strength of the European people was the scientific process of honest Christendom. The strength of Indo-European people, as in the strength of northern pagans, where the term pagan originally essentially came from, because ultimately the term pagan was derived to separate the Italo-Etruscan culture, as in, like, separate the Swiss and the Italian culture groups from the Germanic and Gaulish culture groups, because ultimately, what were the Romans? Pagan, duh. But what is a barbarian? Let's go to the definition of that. It's someone that goes bar 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 bar. Who are those? The Celts. The Celts go bar 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 bar. The Germans go cord 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 cord. It's just what it is. So and there's also the Barbary Coast, which was named after the fact that barbarians, the Vandals, did live there. So, what is a pagan? Well, it's just one particular lineage that went into the... I went over yesterday how Catholicism brings forth pagan truths, right? It went into influencing Rome through the Etruscans. And those gigantic communal pooping houses, they're meant to synchronize militaries so that nobody in a particular phalanx, right, where everybody is you're only as strong as your weakest link in a phalanx, everybody's synchronize their poops. So nobody's going to get caught lacking in that situation, which is very important. If you think about working out, think about regularity, it's very important. You see a lot of bodybuilders, they're just staying on the broccoli and chicken, staying on the broccoli. But yeah, there's not any inherent Aryan powers, and it's not pressure from weather alone, nor is it necessarily a high tendency towards pastoralism and the excess meat that I would put into somebody's diet. The foundation it all rests on, as in what allowed them to build high pastoralism, what allowed them to go into the intense environment of the north, what allowed them to become Aryans, which is essentially just a shared culture group of the Indo-Europeans that stretches all the way over, from basically Korea, since that's part of the Finno-Ugric, that does have a lot to do with Finland, that is part of Europe and Indo-Europe. It's very complex. So the Indo-Europeans were lower. They were more around where modern Turks are. And the Finno-Ugrics were up north, Siberia. So you have the Siberian shamans and you have the Indo-Europeans. And they shared a lot of similar culture. The Indo-European shamans influenced the Indo-European shamans were influenced by the Siberian shamans, and then they brought over oxen and chickens and picked up horses in the Eurasian steppe, brought them over. Apparently cows themselves come from Syria, so somewhere around Syria, somewhere around basically Persia, where the first cow came from, but the first ox, very useful as farm equipment, came from Tibet. And so, the strength that allowed them to gather all of these resources together and head out into a very harsh land is probably turmeric from India and beets. Definitely beets. I think it's far wiser to say it was yeast culture that domesticated humans. Fascinating to think about things like unleavened bread being part of Abrahamic religion, but like it's in the communion wafers, and it's also, the whole unleavened bread, matzah thing that Jewish people are into. I think it's very fascinating to think about, like, the yeast culture that also can get on us and, like, attaches directly to us. It also makes bread. The most important thing for humanity throughout the last 2,000, 3,000 years is risen bread. And beer, which is the most important thing for formation of urban cultures, right? So cultures that have popped up in the last, like, 5,000 years specifically owe a lot of their existence, say Babylon, or the Hittites, the Germani, the Celts. They owe their existence to beer and the combination of other things that their natural ancestry cultivated and then brought into their culture. So beer is like the combination of both beer and beets made the Germans such a capable yet wishy-washy people. I love the German people. Love them, love them, love them. They have great science, terrible history. It's very rare that you'll find worse historians than German historians because they lie all the time. I think anybody talking about socialism should be forced to read Peter Kropotkin's Conquest of Bread, and anybody talking about fascism should be forced to read Julius Evola, the Holy Grail specifically. Then we'll have a real discussion going on. So far, I've heard a lot of people hooting and hollering about fascism, hooting and hollering about socialism. They don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. And if they read Peter Kropotkin, who used to be like an elite in Russia, Conquest of Bread, probably the single most intelligent communist thinker, period. And he's more of an anarchist. He doesn't really believe in things like communism. He believes in more of like the inherent human nature and stuff like that. Him and Gramsci, the only ones really of worth that I can think of. Him and Gramsci. Trotsky, Lenin, come on. Come on. And Julius Evola is a very genius thinker. Like, he was really getting to the point. Julius Evola is somebody that helped awaken my intellectual auspices, the things that I'm aiming towards. People have been fooled by elites claiming to know the true will of God since time immemorial. Why do you think that is? For that matter, why do societies that maintain a stringent priestly caste, stringent being the key word there, endure in perpetuity without undermining themselves like the kings of Tyre? It's because the people intuit that there is something there. People always inherently know of the divine. They need knowledge to truly know God. Some societies deem that to be worthy of all people. And those have noble ambition. But at the end of the day, the ones that say, only a few of us may know, but those will try their hardest and make it their full-time job to educate people with that divine knowledge in the most pragmatic possible way for the best of all society, including that individual. So, stringent is a very key qualifier to priestly caste, because you can have a very sloppy priestly caste. You see it today. There should never be people like Shmuley Biotek that are called the honorific of rabbi, because he's not. He's not. He's definitely not. There's thinking that you can lie to God, and then there's taking sacred things and deliberately blaspheming them over and over and over again with the knowledge that you're doing exactly that. A covenant is an organization that any man, woman, and child may enter into, usually under the direction of a spiritual high priest. No covenant with God may abide unnatural behavior, as God's laws are entirely natural. All of nature is entirely God's laws. Yahweh is an interesting term for God, an interesting name for God. It's like the sounds a little baby makes. Yeah, wee, yeah, wee, yeah, wee. You know? G/D is a way more fascinating name for God. It's a very reformed 20th century Jewish name, and it reminds me of Ben Shapiro saying wet ass P word while hate quoting a Nicki Minaj song by the same name. Another exactly of the letter of the law, void of the spiritual law situation going on there, I believe. Ass is also a cuss, but ass is not defined by the FCC as a cuss like P word is. So you have Ben Shapiro in this hilarious instance cussing and then saying P word. Cussing and then saying P word over and over and over again. And it's a fascinating thing because, like, he's following the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law would say wet A word P word. That would be the spirit of the law, or just don't do it at all. But instead, this fascinating halfway, and everybody saw this. So if you're not aware of this, if you're watching, if you're listening, and you don't know what I'm talking about, this is something that went viral, where Ben Shapiro quoted this song from just a pop star, literally like a very low fidelity, lowest common denominator pop star. And like he made a fool of himself saying that B words aren't supposed to be wet. My doctor wife knows that they're not, that's an infection. And he's just like, buddy, we're not talking about like, come on. But at the end of the day, like that halfway point in between censorship is fascinating to think about. And I think the G/D thing that you see online a lot is exactly in line with that. And that is exactly in line with Reformed Jewish thought. And that's exactly in line with the, well, they may be a blasphemous, unholy cretin, but, you know. But the letter of the law says that they can become a rabbi. The spirit of the law, of course, abhors it in every step, but... One day, someone invented the term modus vivendi, meaning of life. In that moment, they were creating something that would last in perpetuity. In that act, they were exercising the definition of their very own new word. Funny little rule of thumb. The more vowels in somebody's name, the more likely the person is to be a Mediterranean. It's true, though. The more consonants in somebody's name, the more likely they are to be farther north. Especially the Polish people. Wowzers. They are allergic to vowels or something. They got a penchant for Z's. Funny, I don't hope this, my lower nature calls me to enjoy this, but I do know this. Joe Biden will die in misery, slowly, with the knowledge of the Holocaust he has allowed Israel to perpetrate against the Gazans. His ego will slip away, and he will depersonalize, knowing that the act he encouraged was both needless, pointless, self-defeating, and along the way to imaginary goalposts, an immense amount of suffering took place. And he's going to die with that knowledge, and there's nothing that's going to save him. When I see a girl whose once beautiful skin is now covered in bathroom wall level scribbles, I get the same instinctual aversion that a horse gets when its rider tries to make it cross a rainbow painted crosswalk, you know? You ever think that maybe old people have back pain because at a certain point you have to ask yourself, am I going to tolerate this, or am I going to kill myself in the process of attempting to alleviate it? And remember, my friends, life is precious. So take a multivitamin every other day and remember to get some sun. Love you. Take care. Cheers.